The challenge you have is the battery life of the drone, right? Because you send it up and it's doing all its really good work, and then you get that goddamn beep, 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 and you have to bring her home. And the race committee is like, well, no, you can't put the drone back in. We're finishing a race. And I'm like, I have to bring the drone back in or it's going in the drink.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 259. Can drones make for a better sailboat race? Today's guest believes they can. Dr. Tulinda Larsen is CEO and founder of Skylark Drone Research, a technology company that empowers Fortune 500 companies with drone analytics, service providers with secure execution of flights, and manufacturers with regulatory airspace compliance. Tulinda has spent more than 40 years in commercial aviation. She's a private pilot, a certified Part 107 remote pilot, and an adjunct professor in the School of Business at Embry Riddle Aeronautical University. Tulinda also serves as an advisor to Women in Drones. Skylark Drone Research also works with sailing organizations to develop drone programs. The company worked with the Annapolis Yacht Club to develop policies and procedures for using drones for sailboat race management, coaching, yacht club events, and other applications. In this edition of the Drone Radio Show, Tulinda talks about how drones are used in sailboat race management. She also shares two exciting new program offerings of Women in Drones, namely a new membership program and a job boards for Women in Drone members. But before we hear from Tulinda, I want to thank those of you who are supporting my funding campaign. Whether it's $1, $100, or much more, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. Go to droneradioshow.com/donate. So let's find out how drones are shaking up sailboat races with Dr. Tulinda Larsen. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Tulinda to introduce herself.
I'm Tulinda Larsen, and I'm CEO, president, founder, chief bottle washer, all there is to a company known as Skylark Drone Research, which was founded back in 2008.
Tulinda, what is Skylark Drone Research?
Skylark Drone Research is my own company. I actually started it out doing economic research in manned aviation or piloted aviation. So I'm trying to get away from that word manned, you know what I mean? So it was piloted aviation. And in 2016, I pivoted to remotely piloted or optionally piloted aviation and formed the DBA of Skylark Drone Research. Skylark Drone Research, since then, I've done several consulting projects. One, the big one, was with NASA as a subcontractor to McKinsey and helping them to understand as they were about to launch the Urban Air Mobility Grand Challenge, understand what the market was for urban air mobility going out the next 20 years. That was one of my big projects. One of my other projects, which is what connected us, I think 2 years ago, was the work that I was doing with the Annapolis Yacht Club and applying drones to sailboat racing.
That part is interesting. I would have never thought that drones had a place in sailboat racing. How are they used?
Well, first of all, drones in sports, management, coaching, racing are invaluable because they provide, as we always say, the bird's eye view that you cannot get any other way. And as far as sailboat racing, there are three key elements of a sailboat race that a drone can help with. And the first is the starting line, because without a drone, you have one boat on one end and then usually just a buoy on the other end. And it's this imaginary line that's called the starting line. And if boats are over early, they're penalized. They have to do a 360 turn and come back. If too many boats are over early, then the race committee calls it and as a general recall, and all the boats have to come back and start over. But you can imagine that looking down an imaginary line from one end of that line, it's hard to see if a boat went over and which boat went over. And that's where working with the Annapolis Yacht Club was so valuable that I flew my Phantom 4 over the signal boat, is what it's called, so that I could keep the flag signals in the frame and look down the line. And we were able to determine if boats were over early. And then the race committee was able to evaluate in real time whether or not the boats on the other end or actually went over early. The second place in a sailboat race is then the boats go over the starting line, and they race down the course, and they have to turn around a buoy. This is buoy racing. And so as they go around the buoy, you need to know if they hit each other or they hit the buoy. Again, that's usually observed by somebody in a boat, usually a rubber raft kind of boat, a dinghy that's very low down. But again, if you have a drone stationed over the turning mark, the race committee way back at the starting line can watch and see if they hit each other and get the penalized. And then the last is obviously with the finish, which is I think where everybody thinks you would need help. And it's like the reverse of the starting line. The committee boat is anchored, and then there's again another imaginary line to another buoy that you have to see the boats coming across. And it's very hard if all the boats are what they call at the pin end, then the race committee on the boat end have a hard time seeing the sail numbers and knowing which ones finished in what order, which is the critical part of any sailboat race. So those are the three key times that drones can come in and by providing the bird's eye view. Actually, it's never really that high. I usually operate about 100, 150 feet above the water so that I can really be able to see the sail numbers and the boat numbers, be able to have very accurate real-time information to help the race committee at the time of the race. The second part is then when you are evaluating if there were protests, if somebody says that they got hit or another sailboat turned on their engine or whatever is the violation that the other boat did in their protest, that the race committee can take the videos that were from the drone and use that to adjudicate any of the protests. So that's what we call around the buoy racing, how valuable drones can be.
How did drones find their way into the Annapolis Yacht Club?
It was a demonstration, a proof of concept, because Annapolis is one of the leading race organizations in the world, but certainly in the United States. And so after the work we did in the summer of 2017, I did a keynote presentation at the Leadership Conference for U.S. Sailing in January 2018, which is the first time that U.S. Sailing ever thought about including drones. And basically, I told everything I just said to you, I did in pictures, and really initiated the conversation of the use of drones in sailboat race management.
And you say you typically fly about 150 feet above the boats, or is it the sea?
Above the sea, because the tallest masts are about 60, 65 feet, so you're still well above them. And because of the angle that you can get looking down the line, you can zoom in. And if you're up too high, you're not getting enough of the detail on the sails and the boat numbers.
How do you position the drone for the race?
It's an imaginary line from a flag on the signal boat to the flag on a buoy. So you just line those two up so that you can see it straight. And that's the parallel that the drone is on as the boats are going over. And usually it's 15, 20 boat for a typical race. Could be a lot more. But if it's a lot more, then they'll generally have staggered starts. The challenge you have with either staggered starts or additional races is the battery life of the drone, right? Because you send it up and it's doing all its really good work, and then you get that goddamn beep, 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 and you have to bring her home. And the race committee is like, well, no, you can't bring the drone back in. We're finishing a race. And I'm like, I have to bring the drone back in or it's going in the drink. That's the biggest challenge, is the battery management. And one thing that I recommend highly is you have a dedicated visual observer for the drone so that you have somebody that you can bring the drone back in. I operated from the committee boat for all the work that I did, but some people actually operated from a separate boat so that they didn't interfere with the committee boat.
Have you ever had one of your drones fall into the sea?
2.
Because they ran out of power? Is that the primary reason?
Yeah, one of them, not during a race though. One of them for my drone was I was out actually helping a friend out imaging a harbor on Long Island, and where we had gone in with the boat, it was low tide and the tide was continuing to go out, and the captain said, "We got to move the boat." So the boat was moving and the drone was trying to come back, and it had a headwind and she didn't make it. One time during a race, it was a very big international competition in Annapolis Harbor. It's a 505. So they're little boats. They're like 14, 18-foot boats, and they have short masts, and they're all the same class boat. And it's international women's double-handed is what it was. Well, that race was sponsored by SAP, the big company, the software company, the big software company. So they flew in from Germany, their hotshot drone pilot. So he comes in, and I was like a giddy schoolgirl. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm getting to meet this guy. So he flew the same Phantom 4 that I had. And he was getting this error message, which I had gotten a couple of days earlier. It was something like your camera, your photograph imaging is not working properly. I brought my drone right in once I got that error. He's trying to clear it, and he couldn't clear it. And then I finally said, what are you going to do? And he said, well, the producer said he doesn't care about any damn error. Get up and fly and get me the images. Don't you know, he took off, the Phantom 4 took off, and because of the photo sensing, I'm not getting the name right, but anybody who's had it, it just means that instead of GPS, it's working on photos, wasn't working. So his drone takes off and immediately turned around and flew back into the boat and crashed and went into the water. I was like, oh my goodness. I said, do you want to fly my drone? He said, no, our rule is gone is gone. I'll just go back to our trailer and get another one. He had like 24 Phantom 4s in his trailer that he was used to losing. They were just disposable. It was amazing. So those are the 2 times that drones have been lost over the water in a reef situation. Yeah, that was really something.
In terms of logistics, how many drones are you using?
You really need 2 drone pilots and 2 visual observers, because you can't really get between the start and the around the buoys fast enough. And then also with battery life. So optimally for around the buoys, you need 2 drone pilots, 107s, and 2 drones, obviously. Actually, you could use 4 drones so that you could send one up, bring the other one in for the battery, That would be ideal.
That's when you need to have that guy around.
Exactly. But on the around the buoy, so I, as I said, I did this speech to U.S. Sailing, and it was about around the buoys race. Following that speech, since then, U.S. Sailing has not really adopted any regulations, any guidelines, any policies, any rules relating to drone use, but there's a lot of debate going on. And Gowrie Insurance, working with Global Aerospace, did, since that in June of 2018, put together a drone insurance program for sailing organizations to use drones. Because as most people know in this industry, drones are aircraft, and aircraft are generally excluded from general liability policies from any, like your homeowners or for an organization like a yacht club, your general liability insurance will say aircraft excluded. So that excludes drones. So Gowrie has put together a really good insurance program for organizations. And so that was introduced since you and I last spoke.
So organizations will feel more secure about using drones.
Yes, and what I like about it is Gowrie insists that all the drone operators must be 107s. You can't just have some parent decide to go out and fly a drone as part of the race. So it's giving structure and recognition to the use of drones in sailboat racing.
Are race organizers now advocating for more use of the drones? Is it growing within the sport?
Excellent question. So the biggest growth in the use of drones has been in the junior sailing program and coaching, because first of all, the coaches tend to be the millennials who have taken to drones very aggressively. And so they are using drones to get the aerial shots to help improve the junior sailing and other racing programs. I mean, they even use them in the America's Cup. But that's been the biggest boom. And then the second boom is spectator use, like the SAP example I gave you. What he was doing is he was sending live stream back to this great big TV screen back on land so that spectators could watch the race. And there have been organizations popping up, like in Annapolis Harbor, we have one that's called T2P, which is Tucker Turner Productions. And they go out for every race, every Wednesday night, every Thursday night, every big race like the 505s, any of the races. And they use both video still and a drone to cover, again, from a spectator point of view. So that's the second biggest. Then the use of drones in race committee has much slower been adopted, partially because the demographics of race committee, you have to think about it, they have to be pretty much retired, because who else can go out in the middle of the day and referee a sailboat race? So they're not tending to be technology adopters. So that's been a problem. And then the second is that U.S. Sailing, therefore, has not told them how to use drones in race management, though there are a number of clubs that are, like Annapolis is still using them kind of unofficially, but still building the knowledge base of how to use a drone to manage a race.
Let's transition into long-distance sailboat racing. Tell us about it, and how are drones used?
So there are several round-the-world races, sailboat races that go for a year or months and months at a time. And then there are shorter ones like Annapolis, Bermuda, Newport, Bermuda, different races that be on the West Coast also connecting coastal points. And they're out at sea for several days, if not weeks, if not months. And in the Volvo Cup, that's an around the world race, one of the contestants had a drone on board, and they saw out in the distance there was a derelict vessel there. And the rules of sailing is, if you see a derelict vessel, you have to get out of the race and go over and see if they need help, right? You have to be a good Samaritan. So instead of doing that, they flew their drone over there, checked out the vessel, and found out that there were no lives on board, so there was nothing to save, and drone came back and they continued on the race. They also use it for looking at their sails, to if they have any needs for repair. It's so much safer to send a drone up the rigging and up the mast to see if what the problem is before sending a human up the mast. They'll use it to go out and look for the weather patterns and where the wind is. So on long distance racing, it's both a safety tool, and that's kind of how it's viewed. And it's becoming more and more adopted. Also, man overboard. It's an amazing tool if you have a man overboard situation. The Navy has adopted the use of drones. They have an autonomous drone that sits on the deck ready to fly at any time. And the sailors all have a chip somewhere on them. And they found they didn't put it in their life jackets, because sometimes they don't have their life jackets on, so it's in their belts. So if that chip gets wet or too far from the boat, the drone automatically takes off. It signals the whole boat that there's a man overboard, goes to the man overboard, and hovers until they can get the man. Without the drone, it could be hours before the boat realized that the man was overboard. So the same thing with the long distance sailing is that they use the drone to help with man overboard and a lot of the safety aspects.
During the sailboat race, can one use a drone to check the wind?
Well, what I argue to U.S. Sailing is that drones are the new cell phone, because in the early days, before we had adopted cell phones as widely as a society, you couldn't make any phone calls while you're in a sailboat race. So you couldn't call home and say, let the cat in or whatever, because you might be also asking for a weather report. So now cell phones are accepted. You can have a cell phone, you can call. It is fine because they figure everybody in the race, if they wanted to, they could have a cell phone and they could make that same inquiry. Going back to U.S. Sailing doesn't have rules, guidelines, or policies yet. So there's no body of information that says you can or you can't. Just some specific races, we'll talk about it. But it's in those infancy stages like cell phones were many years ago, where they are being used and anybody could get a drone themselves. And as long as it's an opportunity that all contestants could use, the rules tend to be allowing such things as checking out the wind. The question is, what if you go over and check out your competitor's sail position? That one's much more dicey, and that's usually prohibited.
How would they get caught?
The whole rules of the games of sailboat racing is protest. So the people on the boat being observed would protest.
Looking into the future, what do you think we might see regarding the use of drones in sailboat racing?
I definitely see U.S. Sailing is now starting to organize to get some formal rules and regulations. And the leading yacht clubs are San Francisco, New York, and Annapolis, and driving forward. And the body of regulations are for the use by contestants, the use by race committee, and then spectators. And pretty much universally, races, regattas, require that the contestants sign, that they understand that there might be drones used for photography. That's one. So it is starting to become accepted practice.
Is there anything about drones in the area of sailboat racing that we missed and should talk about?
I think we covered it. So what I'd like to do is slide into my other thing I'm doing these days, which is helping the organization known as Women in Drones.
Okay, so tell us, first of all, what is Women in Drones?
First of all, we thank you for your support, because you have been definitely an advocate for helping to balance the gender equation in the UAS and UAM industry. Women in Drones was founded in 2017 by Sharon Rossmark, and she developed very quickly an informal network of more than 6,000 women interested, participating in the unmanned systems, mainly the drones, looking at smaller, less than 55-pound aircraft. And she started out and she realized that there was a real need to highlight, to recognize women who are doing really cool things with drones. And she started the We Are All Awesome program, where she does profiles on the Women in Drones website of women doing really, really awesome things with drones. I was one of her early profiles. And I mean, it's been great. And I love reading all of them. One of them is as young as 7 years old, who's programming her own drone. And my intern, who's 16, she was profiled because as soon as she turned 16, she got her 107, and she's been out there working with the Girl Scouts and all the opportunities. So that's how Women in Drones got started. And it just keeps growing. So we decided that January we launched a membership program so that we could get a tighter connection with this network of women in drones. And it's not just women, it's also men, because it's an ecosystem that we're building to help support and balance the gender equation. So we started the membership program with several categories. We have individual, corporate, affiliate, and education. And we are rapidly converting this informal network into a membership organization. And by being a membership organization, we have much stronger connections with our members where we can offer benefits. We now are offering drone insurance, general liability insurance on a group basis to our members. Funny one we're offering is pet insurance, just because as a group we could get a nice discounted pet insurance for everyone's dogs and cats. That one's been very popular. We offer services to help review your resume and your LinkedIn profile, help with mentoring and understanding something called the imposter syndrome, which is very common for women who feel like, I know I did for most of my career, feel like I don't really belong here. And maybe they'll find out that kind of feeling that you have. And I don't know why women feel that way, but it's a great little video series on how to overcome that. We offer discounts on products and services such as Fox Fury's fabulous high-intensity lighting for drones. So it's a very comprehensive set of benefits that now we can offer to our members, and then now we're able to communicate with them more directly. And the second thing we launched is our job board, because what we found at the different conferences that Women in Drones is at, companies would come up and they would say, we've got the jobs, we can't find the women. So we launched our jobs board where companies can post their jobs and job seekers can come in and can post their resume and review the jobs. So we are off and running on both those programs.
How is the job board performing? Any feedback yet?
Yeah, we really do. Even though it's just about a month that it's up and running, we have 13 companies up there posting jobs. And then in addition to those companies, we feed in from Indeed UAV jobs from Indeed.com. But one of the companies is Loveland Innovation. They have 7 jobs posted for 107 pilots, and they've received 75 inquiries and 9 completed applications. So they're like ecstatic. They think this is fabulous. And then in Maryland, FAA UAS test site in Maryland was looking for a chief pilot, and they received 3 applications from our website, from our jobs board. So they're very happy. And Women in Drones put up one job of a sales associate. And sure enough, we got an applicant and we just hired her. So it's working. It's a small scale right now, but just like the membership is rapidly growing. I mean, we signed up in the month 100 members already. So we're definitely on path to be well over 1,200, 1,500 members by the end of the year. And as the membership grows, of course, so does the participation in the jobs board.
How would you characterize the growth of women in the industry since your first involvement with drones?
That's interesting because usually the question that's asked is, why aren't there more women in the drone sector? And so the answer to both that questions. So ironically, we're actually doing a little bit better than commercial pilots. Commercial pilots, about 6%, just under 6% of all commercial pilots are women. At the end of 2019, women 107s, there were 10,000 of them, which is a little bit more than 6% of the total number of Part 107s at the end of 2019. So we're doing a little bit better than the commercial pilots, but still, there are far more opportunities for women to come in to drones. I do feel that you don't need this deep aviation background to participate in the UAS and drone industry. You will need it for urban air mobility. But right now, and for the foreseeable future, there's such a high demand for drone pilots and people who are in drone operations. And many of them have been businesses that were going about in their industry, mining or construction, and then realize that, wow, drones are a tool, and then they add them to their toolkit for their business, as opposed to traditional aviation, where you go to school and you have to have 1,500 hours and you have to do medicals and all that. It's a much higher hurdle to get through. The hurdle to become a drone pilot, as we all know, is a little too low, just having a written test. But even so, you can get into from a wide variety of backgrounds, and marine biologists, agriculture, and so that it opens a lot more opportunities for participation by women.
Because Women in Drones provides a focal point for women to obtain information, are more women taking advantage of the site just to see if the drone industry has something for them?
We hope so. We certainly are finding that our STEM program, which we start at kindergarten and working with young women, again, it's not just women. We are both women and men, but starting young and all the way through now, we help women from kindergarten to career by having the jobs board be able to come into the industry and find success. So I would like to say, yes, Women in Drones, thanks to Sharon's initiative to get it off the ground so early, because as you know, Part 107 became effective in September 2016, and she launched Women in Drones in the spring of 2017. So it's been from the beginning, which is awesome.
That's great, Tulinda. Any final comments?
Well, anyone who's interested, womenindrones.com. It's on the home page. You can see our last year Women to Watch. We had 6 women awardees. And then we also had, for the first time, Piloting Innovation, where we awarded a company who demonstrated a proactive approach to recruiting women drone pilots and women into their drone operations, and that was the Fox News Network. Both of those programs are continuing this year. In March, we'll be opening up nominations for both those awards, which will be awarded at Interdrone in August of this year. So things are continuing to unfold with Women in Drones, and it's just such an exciting time.
That's it for episode 259 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Dr. Tulinda Larsen of Skylark Drone Research. I want to thank Tulinda for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about Skylark Drone Research or want to connect with Tulinda, check out the website at skylarkdrones.com. You can find more information on Women in Drones, including access to their job boards and membership program, at womenindrones.com. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1, you can help defray the cost of production. To donate, go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Gores.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.